This happened almost 8 years ago. I was a park ranger, excited about a train trip to a conference. I thought it would be a nice break. Jake, my partner, was with me. I figured we deserved some time away from the wilderness. Little did we know what lay ahead. The train was old, but had charm. It rattled along tracks surrounded by thick forests. While the scenery should have felt peaceful, I noticed something was off. My gut twisted with unease. We joked about bears we'd encountered, how I barely escaped one last summer. I brushed my cold fingers against the window, pretending to admire the view, but the sense of wrongness lingered. As we settled into our seats, vibrations rolled through the train. The lights flickered. "Just a mechanical hiccup," Jake said cheerfully. I wanted to believe him, but the air turned heavy, almost stifling, making it hard to breathe. Outside the window, the trees felt more menacing, like dark sentinels. Hours passed and the sky darkened. With each mile, I felt the world outside grow thicker and gloomier. The conversations in our cabin waned. I overheard whispers, a child's voice talking about shadows lingering by the windows. My skin prickled. I can still hear those soft words. They felt like an omen. I turned to Jake, who was blissfully chuckling at a story about a raccoon. I felt so alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The temperature dropped. I shivered, glancing at our fellow passengers. Their faces were pale, eyes glancing nervously around our small cabin. I whispered to Jake that something felt off. Then a scream pierced the air. A man jumped up, his face twisted in fear. "Something's out there!" he shouted, pointing through the foggy window. I turned to look, but I couldn't see anything, just swirling mists obscuring the trees. My heart raced. I felt trapped on the train. The thick fog enveloped the world outside. More passengers stood up, and fear spread like wildfire. It wasn't just me anymore. Someone else gasped and pointed, and suddenly the train's cabin was filled with whispers. "What is that?" I strained to see, breath quickening. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and then they were gone. Others seemed to feel it too, a presence lurking. I wanted to leave that train, to run. "Just a trick of the light," Jake said, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. I felt chills, the whispers growing louder. The train jerked suddenly, like it was struggling to keep moving. The shadows began to dance along the walls of the cabin. They were real. I could feel their weight pressing against my chest. Then the train slowed. The rattling stopped, and a thick silence fell. I looked around, searching for any sign of what had just happened, but the passengers were quiet, faces now pale with fear. When we reached our stop, I got off trembling. I turned to Jake, but didn't know what to say. We looked back at the train. It disappeared into the fog behind us, as if it never existed at all. My mind raced. What did we just witness? Some days I still wonder if we dreamed it, or if something truly was waiting for us in that darkened woods. The next day, I woke up feeling disoriented. The events of the prior night clung to me like fog. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. I went about my morning routine, but the unease nagged at me. I couldn't focus on anything. Even the safe confines of my small apartment felt strained, as if shadows were watching me from the corners. Around noon, I decided to meet Jake for lunch. Maybe talking about it would help. I wanted to know if he felt the same dread I had. As I walked to the diner, the sun was bright, but it did little to warm my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we had experienced on the train had left a mark on me, something not easily washed away. When I arrived at the diner, Jake was already seated. He looked even more tired than I felt. "You okay?" His voice was rough. I grinned weakly, but my stomach twisted. "Still processing," I admitted, my hands shaking slightly. "I just can't stop thinking about last night." "Me neither," he said, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I've been thinking, What if it wasn't just our minds playing tricks? Those words settled heavily on me. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. What if there was something out there? The stories, the legends about that part of the woods. I heard them when I first became a ranger. Something about an ancient presence. Some say it lures people in. A shiver crept down my spine. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Jake shrugged, his eyes dark with thought. What if we weren't the only ones that noticed? What if others have seen it too? "We need to find out," I said, my resolve hardening. It felt wrong to leave it alone, just sitting in our minds. After lunch, we headed to the park office. I rummaged through old files and reports, while Jake asked around for any insights from other rangers. As I sifted through yellowed papers, I stumbled across a diary, its leather cover cracked. The last entry was dated nearly a decade ago. I opened it, my heart pounding. The writing was shaky, but I could make out the words clearly. "I hear them at night, whispers from the trees. They call to me, deep voices echoing in my dreams." That's when I saw it. A photograph slipped between the pages. A group of rangers standing in front of the same train we had traveled on. Their faces looked familiar, but mottled with fear. One of them was
looking sideways, as if something lurked just out of frame. Instantly, the room felt colder. "Jake, look at this," I said, pointing at the photo. But as I turned, my breath caught. The photograph wasn't just a fading memory. It was a piece of the past reaching directly into my present. Jake grabbed my arm. "What is it?" Before I could answer, the lights above flickered. The room felt alive, shadows stretching and deepening. I took a step back, dread flooding my chest. Something was shifting in the air, and I realized I wasn't alone. In that moment, I knew we had to confront what we'd seen, but something told me it was just the beginning. The flickering overhead lights sent a jolt of fear through me. It felt like a warning, an omen. I exchanged a quick glance with Jake, whose wide eyes mirrored my own panic. The shadows danced around us, almost alive in their movement. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing heart. "What just happened?" I whispered, hoping Jake had an answer. But he looked just as lost. "Maybe it's just a short circuit," he said, attempting to sound casual, though his voice wavered. We both knew it was more than that. I moved toward the door, feeling an overwhelming urge to escape the room. "Let's get out of here," I urged, pulling Jake with me. We hurried down the hall, past old maps and fading posters of animals that had long since vanished from those woods. The air outside felt fresher, but it did little to stop the dread pooling in my stomach. "We need to talk to someone who knows more about this," I said, scanning the park for familiar faces. "We can't keep brushing this off." Jake nodded. "What about Tom? He's been around long enough to know the stories." As we approached Tom's office, I hesitated. The unease from earlier crept back. Maybe confronting the past wasn't the best idea. But I steeled myself, knowing we needed answers. We knocked, and a moment later, a tired-faced man opened the door. "What's got you both looking like you'd seen a ghost?" Tom asked, a half-smile appearing. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside. "It's about the train, last night." Tom's expression shifted from friendly to serious. "I thought you two might find your way here eventually. I have something to show you." He led us to a back room, filled with old maps and the scent of musty paper. On a table, he laid out a series of articles and handwritten notes. This was compiled by a ranger who vanished several years ago. He was researching the same stories we're talking about. My eyes scanned the pages. Most mentioned strange occurrences, lights in the sky, missing persons, and whispered voices in the dark. I felt a chill run down my spine as I recognized some of the names. Rangers who had worked alongside Jake and me. They had gone missing. Did you know them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom paused. Yes, and it was never the same after they disappeared. People started talking about things lurking in the woods. I thought it was just paranoia, but he trailed off, looking at the floor. With everything that's happened, Jake said slowly, we can't ignore it anymore. Tom nodded gravely. You should tread carefully. The woods have a way of revealing things we're not ready to see. That's when the lights in the office flickered again, plunging us into sudden darkness. My heart raced. We were losing control. Then a voice broke through the silence, soft yet clear. Help us. I spun around, but there was no one else in the room. My breath quickened as I stared at Tom and Jake. What was that? Jake stammered, his face pale. I don't know, I said, fear creeping into my bones. But we need to find out. We can't turn back now. As the lights flickered to life, a dark shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I caught a glimpse of something, a figure, before it vanished. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Next steps, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. We go to the woods. We find out what happened. Tom opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. No more waiting. We need to face this now. We stepped back outside, the sun starting to set. Shadows lengthened, and a feeling of urgency filled the air. Whatever was out there was waiting for us. The woods loomed ahead, dark and imposing. The tall trees swayed gently, almost welcoming us. Yet I felt an intense chill race down my spine. I wanted to turn back, to leave the mysteries behind. But the urgency of the unknown pulled me forward. Jake walked beside me, his footsteps echoing in the growing silence. You really think we'll find something? He asked, his voice edgy. I don't know, I admitted, but we have to try. We trailed deeper into the woods, the fading light casting eerie shadows on the ground. As we moved further away from the park, the sense of being watched settled heavily on us. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking just beyond my sight. After a few minutes, we emerged into a small clearing. It was a quiet spot, with a long-forgotten bench and a rusted sign pointing toward old hiking trails. This place looks abandoned, I remarked, scanning the area. You think the others came here? Jake wondered aloud. Maybe. It seems just as eerie as the stuff in the articles. I walked toward the bench, brushing off the dirt. This could be a good place to start. But before we could settle, a rustling sound tore through the air. We froze, eyes darting to the trees. My heart raced. Did you hear that? Yeah, Jake whispered, his gaze locked on the foliage. The leaves shifted again. I felt a wave of anxiety rush over me. We should go. It's probably just an animal. But as I turned to leave, a shadow darted behind a tree trunk. My breath caught. Wait, I said, holding out a hand. Did you see that? Jake nodded slowly. Whatever it is, it's watching us. With every nerve in my body screaming, I stepped closer to the trees. Come on, I urged. Let's find out what it is. We approached cautiously, and the rustling grew louder. Then the figure stepped into the light. A man, dirty and disheveled, his eyes wide with fear. Help me, he shouted, arms outstretched. Surprise jolted through me. Who are you? I asked. He took a step forward, but stumbled. I was left. They took me, and I thought they'd leave me for dead. You have to get out of here. They're coming. Who's coming? Jake pressed, stepping closer. They won't let you leave. You're not safe, he cried, his voice rising in panic. Just then, a cold breeze swept through the clearing. It carried with it a low hum, growing louder and more unsettling. What is that? Jake whispered, looking around frantically. I glanced back at the man. Do you know what's happening here? He backed away, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "You have to run. They can sense fear." Before I could respond, the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. The humming intensified, turning into an echoing whisper that crawled under my skin. "Help us! Help us!" "Let's go!" I shouted, grabbing Jake's arm. We turned to flee, but as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just crossed a line. Behind us, the man's terrified shouts faded into the whispers, swallowed by the darkening woods. We burst from the trees, gasping for air as we reached the park, heartbeats racing. But something was different now. I could still hear the whispers in my mind. "Help us." I turned, looking back at the woods, feeling that we hadn't escaped at all. We had only begun to scratch the surface. And now, the next step was even more unclear. What had we unleashed? I can't shake the feeling of dread as we stood at the edge of the park, breathing hard and scanning the dark woods. I looked at Jake, who was pale and visibly shaken. "What just happened? Who was that guy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," he replied, shaking his head. "But he sounded terrified. I don't think we should have gone in there." I nodded, still processing the chaotic rush of words that had just poured from that man. He said they could sense fear. What does that even mean? Jake took a step back from the edge of the trees, looking over his shoulder at the growing shadows. Maybe he was just out of his mind. People can get twisted in the woods, you know. But what if he was telling
The truth? What if we need to find out more? I argued, an odd mix of fear and curiosity driving me. The whispers lingered, a pulsing echo in my brain, beckoning me back. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We need to get help. We can't handle this alone." But as he spoke, a figure appeared in the distance. It was another person, stumbling out from the tree line. My stomach dropped as the whispers picked up volume, overlapping and merging into a single chilling sound. "Help us! Help us!" This time it was a woman, wild hair and torn clothing, just like the man before. She locked eyes with us, and I felt that sinister pull again, as if she was magnetized by my fear. "You have to listen! They're here!" she cried, her voice cracking. Jake stepped back, visibly shaken. "We can't go near her! Look at her!" I hesitated. The surface of the chaos beckoned me, but I knew we were on unstable ground. "Please, just talk to us," I said, trying to control the quiver in my voice. Her gaze was frantic, darting back toward the woods. "You don't understand. They'll take you too." Jake grabbed my arm forcefully. "We need to leave, now." But before we could move, the laughter began. It was low at first, echoing from the trees, that same chilling sound from before. "Help us! Help us!" morphed into mocking laughter that felt like it was wrapping around us, squeezing the air out of our lungs. "Run!" I yelled, tugging at Jake as we turned away from the woman. We sprinted across the park, desperate to put distance between us and whatever was lurking behind. Once we reached the safety of the streetlights, I looked back. The woman stood still at the tree line, her expression a mix of desperation and resignation. "You'll regret it!" she screamed, her voice swallowed by the night. I steadied my breath, but couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. What does she mean? Jake's eyes were wide, almost frantic. "We need to find those rangers, the ones that witnessed whatever happened. They might know something." "Yeah," I said, my heart racing. "But how do we find them? It's been 8 years." Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, a new message flashing on the screen. "Meet me at the old station. It's not safe anymore." I turned to Jake, my heart sinking as I realized we were being pulled deeper into this mystery. "Looks like we're not done yet." We exchanged glances, every instinct urging us to flee, but the force of the unknown was relentless. I knew we had to follow this thread. "Let's go," I said, not fully believing what lay ahead. But deep down, a dark curiosity compelled me to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The old station loomed ahead. It was rusted and forgotten, hidden beneath creeping vines and shadows. My heart hammered as we stepped forward, the dirt crunching beneath our shoes. "This place hasn't changed at all," I murmured, trying to convince myself we were still safe. Jake glanced around, nervous energy radiating from him. "What if this is a trap?" he whispered, his eyes flickering toward the dark corners of the station. "I don't know, but we have to find out who sent that message," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "This is the only lead we have." As we approached the entrance, something flickered in the corner of my vision. I turned to see a figure slip behind one of the old ticket booths. Panic surged through me. "Did you see that?" Jake squared his shoulders, his fear morphing into determination. "Let's check it out." He stepped forward, and I followed closely behind, my pulse racing. The inside of the station was dimly lit, a few errant beams of moonlight spilling through cracked windows. Dust settled thickly on every surface, testament to years of neglect. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing back at me. It felt strange, as if the building was holding its breath. Then, just past the ticket counter, I saw her, a young woman with wild eyes, identical to the woman we had seen at the park. She was shaking, her eyes darting from the shadows to us. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. Jake took a step back. "We know what you saw. We want to help." Her expression darkened. "You don't understand. The Rangers, they didn't just disappear. They were taken. We were warned at the old watchtower, but no one believed us." I felt a twist of fear in my stomach. What does that mean? Taken by what? The woman shook her head, too afraid to answer. "You can't trust anyone. They feed on fear. They smell it like blood. You've already been marked." "Marked?" I whispered, chills racing down my spine. I exchanged a worried glance with Jake. "Is that what the man meant? Is that why she said they could sense us?" "Yes, they know you're here now." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You need to leave before it's too late." Before I could respond, the air changed. A heavy stillness enveloped the room, and I could feel it, the pulse of something dark lurking nearby. The lights flickered, and an unsettling laughter echoed from the shadows. "We have to go," Jake shouted, grabbing my wrist and pulling me back toward the exit. We stumbled through the doorway, but the laughter grew louder, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. "They're coming," the woman yelled, her voice faint behind us. "You have to run." We sprinted back to the street, panic surging through me with each step. I risked a glance back, and for a moment I thought I saw shadows swirling in the doorway, reaching out as if to pull us back. Then, from the edge of the woods, the man and woman we had seen earlier emerged, their expressions twisted in terrifying anticipation. "Help us! You're not safe!" they shouted in unison, their voices mingling with the haunting laughter. Just as we reached the streetlights, something caught my eye on the ground. A red scarf. It was crumpled, stained, and unmistakably familiar. I dropped to pick it up, recognition crashing over me with brutal force. "That's my sister's," I breathed, the significance hitting hard. She was believed to have vanished here during that camping trip, 8 years ago. But I couldn't dwell on it. The shadows were closing in. I shot a terrified look at Jake, understanding dawning between us. We had to find out what really happened. But the darkness was closing in fast, and it wanted us. We didn't stop running until the old station was far behind us. The weight of the scarf in my hand felt like a lead anchor pulling me back to the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. "We need to get out of here," I gasped, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see shadows crawling closer. Jake nodded, his face pale. "Where can we go? They're after us."
I didn't have an answer. The woods around us loomed like a tangled maze, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. "Maybe we can find the watchtower she mentioned," I proposed, fighting the tremor in my voice. "It could be a safe place." "What if we find whatever took those mangers?" Jake asked, his tone laced with uncertainty. "What if we can't escape it?" I swallowed hard. The laughter still echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the peril that hovered in the air. "We can't leave without knowing. We need to find out what happened." Reluctantly, Jake agreed. We made our way to the path that led deeper into the woods. The trees stood tall, their silhouettes casting dark shadows that flickered in the dim light. With every step, I could feel my resolve waver. "Stay close," I muttered, gripping the scarf tightly. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made us both jump. "What was that?" Jake whispered sharply. "I don't know," I replied, scanning the darkness nervously. "But we should keep moving." As we pressed on, a chilling breeze swept through the trees, and I shivered. The air felt electric, charged with an unsettling energy. Was it just the fear, or was something truly watching us? Minutes seemed to stretch into hours as we navigated through the forest. I tried to focus on the goal ahead, but my thoughts always drifted back to my sister. Could she have experienced anything like this? If she was taken, what had that woman meant by marked? Then we stumbled upon it, the old watchtower, its structure crooked and hunched over like an old man ready to fall. It appeared as if it had been abandoned for ages, yet there was an undeniable presence about it. "This is it," I said, stepping toward the base, my heart pounding. Jake hesitated. "Do you really want to go up there? What if they're waiting for us?" "Do you have a better idea?" I snapped, frustration seeping through my fear. "I just need to know." I started climbing the rickety steps, the wood creaking beneath my weight. Jake followed reluctantly, each step a battle against the growing dread clawing at my insides. At the top, the view stretched wide, but it was the darkened clearing below that caught my eye. That's when I saw it. Movement, shadowy figures converging at the edge of the woods. Not just shadows. They were watching. "Jake," I whispered, heart racing. "Look." I pointed toward the silhouettes, my breathing quickening. They were human in shape, but twisted, distorting under the thin moonlight. A gut-wrenching realization hit me. "That's who took the Rangers!" I gasped, stepping backward, nearly losing my footing. Panic surged as I stumbled against the railing. "We have to get down," Jake urged, grabbing my arm. But something shifted among the figures, and I could see them clearer now. The eyes, glimmering with an unsettling hunger, locked onto me. And I felt it, the weight of fear pouring in like a tidal wave. "Run!" I shouted, the urgency blaring in my mind. But as I turned to flee, the laughter returned, echoing against the tower's walls. They were coming for us, and this time we weren't just marked, we were hunted. I didn't wait for Jake's answer. I dashed down the stairs, my heart thudding in sync with the frantic beat of my thoughts. One glance at those figures had crippled my mind. The laughter twisted through the branches like the wind, but there was no place to hide. "Keep up!" I shouted, fear seeping into my voice as I hit the ground. Jake landed next to me, breathing heavily. His eyes darted around, scanning the dark. The instincts to flee felt primal, undeniable. "Which way?" he gasped, his eyes wide. "Toward the trees." I pointed in the direction where the woods thickened. We had to get lost in the underbrush, away from the tower, away from those eyes that seemed to see right through us. We plunged into the thick foliage, the branches clawing at us, grabbing at our clothes. It felt like a chase in the dark, and yet I could sense the presence of our pursuers, shifting and whispering in the shadows. My chest heaved, each breath a struggle against the growing knot of panic. "Do you think they saw us?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, but we can't stop." I grabbed onto the nearest tree, using it as leverage to move faster, the sound of Jake's footsteps echoing mine. The forest was suffocating, a maze of darkness with no clear exit. But then, something shifted again. I heard a low growl, low enough to send chills racing down my spine. I turned my head, catching a fleeting glimpse of movement behind a tree. Just a shadow, but it was there, lurking. Did you hear that? Jake's eyes were wide, filled with raw fear. Yeah, I managed, keeping my voice steady. We need to find shelter. We came across a small clearing, the moon casting pale light over the ground. Let's hide here, I said, crouching behind a thick bush. I could barely feel my heartbeat over the cacophony of sounds, the distant rustling, the strange laughter that droned like a morning song. Jake crouched beside me, his breath shallow. We sat in the dim light, trying to calm ourselves. I was hyper-aware of the surroundings, every noise amplified. I shushed Jake as he shifted, our eyes glued to the edge of the clearing. Then, out of the shadows, I saw it again, the beastly figure that seemed to be hunting us. Dark and hunched, it moved with an unsettling grace, sniffing the ground like an animal in pursuit. It paused at the edge of the trees, its head tilting as if listening, as if it could smell the fear radiating off us. "What do we do?" Jake looked at me, wide-eyed. "Wait, maybe it will pass." My voice barely broke through the tension. We held our breaths. The moments stretched painfully, each second feeling like an eternity. Just when I was convinced we were safe, the laughter rose again, louder and closer, followed by a cacophony of footsteps. "It's not alone," I whispered, panic bubbling within me. I was about to bolt from our cover when suddenly I spotted something on the ground. A dark, crumpled figure near the tree line. My stomach dropped. "Jake, look!" "What?" he whispered, turning to where I pointed. "No, it can't be." I recognized the uniform. "It's one of the Rangers." There it was, the piece of the puzzle that raised more questions than answers. And yet, alongside it, shadows shifted once more, darker and more menacing. That growl rose again, cutting through the night. A snap of a branch broke our concentration. Instinct took over. "Now!" I shouted as we bolted into the deeper woods, heart racing, deeper into the unknown. As we ran, the laughter followed us, alive, echoing, relentless. We couldn't let it catch us. The hunt was on, and everything was unraveling faster than I could comprehend. The ground was uneven beneath my feet, roots and rocks threatening to trip us as Jake and I raced through the trees. The laughter faded slightly, but the sound of footsteps was right behind us, echoing on the damp ground. They were closing in. "Where are we going?" Jake panted, struggling to keep up. "Anywhere but here," I shouted back, pushing through the undergrowth. Each movement felt desperate, fueled by the instinct to survive. We burst through another thicket, plunging into a deeper part of the woods. Moonlight sprinkled through the canopy, but shadows clung to the edges like ghosts, reminding me that we were far from safe. I caught Jake's arm, my eyes wide as I noticed a cave just ahead. "In there!" We ducked inside, the cool air hitting my face. It smelled damp and earthy, but it was better than being out in the open. I pressed myself against the wall, feeling the solid rock beneath my fingertips. I was shaking, partly from fear and partly from the chill. Jake slid down to the ground, resting his back against the same wall. "Do you think they'll find us?" His voice shook more than he wanted to admit. "I don't know. I hope not." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to push down the panic bubbling in my chest. "But we can't stay here too long. We need to keep moving." A shuffling sound echoed from the cave's entrance, and I held my breath as I pushed Jake lower against the ground.
We were not out of the woods yet. Then I saw a shadow block the moonlight. My heart raced as I caught a glimpse of a figure standing outside. It was just a silhouette, but the heavy breathing and the way it moved, there was no mistaking it. This was one of them. The laughter erupted again, a haunting sound that filled the air. I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to drown it out. "Can't they just leave us alone?" Jake whispered angrily. "They're playing a game," I hissed back, "and we're the prey." Suddenly, a harsh, raspy voice called out, "Boys, we know you're in there. Come out and play." The voice sent cold chills racing down my spine. "Play?" Jake echoed softly, his eyes wide with terror. Before I could respond, the figure stepped back, revealing 3 more lurking behind it. They were covered in dark, tattered clothes, and their eyes glinted in the dim light. They didn't seem entirely human. I could see their grins, sharp and jagged, spreading wider at our visible fear. "It's time to join the fun," one taunted, laughter spilling into the night. I grabbed Jake's arm, motioning for him to stay quiet. It was like a scene out of a nightmare, no escape, no way to reason with them. My mind raced for a plan, but in that moment I felt helpless, trapped in a web of fear. But then something unexpected happened. One of the figures stumbled, losing their balance as they stepped on a loose rock. I barely had time to think before I realized it could be our chance. "Now!" I whispered urgently, shoving Jake forward. We bolted out of the cave, hearts hammering as we charged back into the maze of trees. Behind us, the laughter, mixed with anger, echoing as they regained their footing. "They're getting away!" I heard shouted, the words driving me forward. We ran, dodging branches and leaping over roots, desperate to put distance between us and our pursuers. But every turn felt familiar. The woods appeared to shift, becoming a labyrinth designed to confuse us. Just as I glanced back, I caught a glimpse of one of them breaking through the underbrush, arms outstretched and eyes wild. My stomach turned. We weren't safe yet, and I knew we needed to find somewhere to hide again. That's when I spotted a fallen tree ahead, covered in thick underbrush. "This way!" I yelled, dashing toward it. We dove behind the tree, breathless and shaking. But then the laughter turned into something more sinister, wrapping around us like a cold embrace. "They think they can hide," one voice jeered, tauntingly close. I looked at Jake, fear mirrored in his eyes. We were out of time. "We've got to move again," I whispered desperately, feeling the heavy weight of dread settle on my shoulders. But where to? Suddenly, something glimmered at the edge of the clearing, and a flicker of hope sparked inside me. "Over there," I pointed breathlessly. "Maybe it's a way out." Without waiting for more words, we pushed forward once more, driven by the need to escape this nightmare. But as we drew closer, I could feel the air around me change. Something was waiting ahead, something far worse than the shadows chasing us. We reached the clearing, my heart pounding in my chest as we burst through the underbrush. The glimmer I'd seen transformed into the old ruins of a small cabin, its walls half collapsed, but still standing defiantly against time. "What if it's a trap?" Jake whispered, fear etched into his features. "We can't stay out in the open," I replied, urgency lacing my voice. The growling laughter reverberated around us, echoing from the trees. In the shadows, I could see figures shifting, like dark smoke weaving through the foliage, edging closer. "We have to check it out." We dashed towards the cabin, pushing through the splintered door that creaked ominously, sending a fresh wave of panic coursing through my veins. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. I hoped it wouldn't be our tomb. We moved quickly, scouting the shadows. The sun was setting, casting long streaks of orange light through the cracks.
enough to illuminate the remnants of forgotten belongings strewn across the floor. Old photographs, tattered books. "This must have been a ranger station," I murmured. "Maybe they came here seeking shelter." "Or they were drawn here," Jake added, unease creeping into his voice. "Do you think they realized what they were up against?" "We need to find anything that can help us," I urged, adrenaline fueling my determination. A part of me feared the whispers outside would follow us in, those insatiable urges to hunt and torment. Just then, I caught sight of a fireplace against the far wall. The fireplace was filled with soot, but curiously, there were fresh scratches along the stone edges. "Look at this," I called out, hurrying over. Someone has used this recently." Jake frowned. "That doesn't help our situation. It tells us we're not alone." But curiosity pulled me closer. I knelt and rummaged around, hoping to find anything useful. Just as I was about to give up, my fingers grazed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out, a small, rusted lantern, still holding a faint trace of oil. "This might help," I said, holding it up. "If we can light it, we can at least see what's lurking outside." "That's great, but we have to find a way out before they come in," he countered, glancing nervously at the door. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Let's check the back. There might be another way out." We moved deeper into the cabin, inching towards the back door. But as I reached for the handle, the sound of crunching leaves and snapping branches reached my ears. I hesitated, realizing the figures outside had closed in. "They're coming," I breathed, panic rising within me. "We have to go, now," Jake said. Just as we turned, the door creaked open, and shadows poured in, cold and oppressive. "You can't hide from us," one voice echoed, chilling to the bone. The figures melted into form, humanoid yet twisted, eyes gleaming with a malevolent hunger. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Jake's wrist and pulling him toward the back of the cabin. We pushed through the door, just as they lunged at us, the darkness hungry and ravenous. We stumbled into the night, breathless. But where to go? Desperation seeped into my bones, each frantic breath a reminder of the urgency pressing down on us. But the forest now offered no sanctuary. Figures encircled us, growing bolder, closer. "This way!" I shouted, darting towards a tree line that felt less foreboding than the rest. But as we ran, the whispers surged, rising to a crescendo that echoed our fear. We plunged into the underbrush and raced down a narrow path that seemed to lead further into the depths of the forest. The laughter twisted behind us, wrapping around our ankles, trying to pull us back. I pushed harder, the adrenaline surging through me. But even as we ran, a sense of dread filled the air. I could feel it pressing against my back, a weight that threatened to crush me. Suddenly, I stumbled over a gnarled root, falling forward into the thick foliage. Pain shot through my hands as I landed. "Get up!" Jake's voice broke through the chaos. "I can't," I started, but he grabbed my arm, pulling me up. "We need to keep moving." But I saw it, the flickering light up ahead, dim but promising. A clearing or a way out. We just had to reach it. I felt the energy shift behind me, the laughter fading momentarily, and I surged forward, fueled by hope. As we closed in on the light, a blinding pulse erupted, flooding the clearing around us. I stumbled and blinked through the brightness. Shadows melted away into the distances. What I saw next froze the breath in my lungs. In the center of the clearing stood the remnants of an ancient altar, crumbling and overgrown, but surrounded by an unearthly glow. Just shadows. They were remnants of lost souls, their faces twisted in silent screams. They beckoned to us, mouths opening wide, silent pleas etched into the air. The laughter surged back, echoing, reverberating around us, as if the woods themselves hungered for our souls. I turned to Jake, desperation clenching my heart. What do we do? Just run! But as we turned to flee, figures sprang up at every edge. Shadows formed into solid entities. Jake reached for my hand, pulling me forward, but I could feel the energy change, the whispers morphing. We won't let you go. The sounds surged, and just as I thought we would be consumed, the light from the altar flared brightly, enveloping us in a warmth that almost felt welcoming. Maybe that's the key, I yelled over the din. We have to... But before I could finish my thought, the darkness shifted once more, closing in. The last thing I could feel was Jake's grip on my hand, and the overwhelming sense of dread as the shadows lunged, and my world collapsed into bright, blinding light. And then, silence. Epilogue. I woke up, disoriented, sprawled across a familiar wooden floor. The cabin was empty, sunlight streaming through the cracks. I bolted upright, my heart racing. "Jake!" I called out, but my voice echoed back, hauntingly lonely. I stumbled outside, the woods now eerily quiet. The path lay before me, yet there was no visible trace of what had happened. Had it been a dream? A haunting? I searched the clearing, desperate to find any sign of Jake, but the forest swallowed my calls. The air was thick with unanswered questions, and as I walked back to the park office, I turned, glancing back at the woods. They felt changed. The darkness lingered, but the whispers had dulled. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something slept there, waiting and watching. And I knew that part of me would always wonder about the secrets still hidden in the shadows.